Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I have a feeling we're going to be joined by a lot of you tonight, and it's really great to see. Hello, hello. While you're filtering in, feel free to pop into the chat and say hello. Tell us where you're coming from. Hey, Sacramento. Malaysia, wow. And Brazil. And Japan. And Canada. This part never gets old, I have to say. This is the wonder of our virtual world. So great to be with you all tonight. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening or good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are tuning in from, and welcome to Visual Poetics in a Word Doc World, a reading and conversation with these four exceptional poets who I'll introduce you to in just a moment. Tonight's program is brought to you by the 2021 Tell It Slant Poetry Festival, produced by the Emily Dickinson Museum. And this week, we're bringing you over 20 free virtual programs featuring over 50 talented poets from around the world. My name is Brooke Steinhauser. I'm the program director at the Emily Dickinson Museum, and I want to welcome you. I'm so glad you're here with us. And thank you for being part of our festival community from around the world. During tonight's reading, we hope you will use the chat feature, as you're doing now of this webinar, to offer up words of encouragement and affirmation to these poets. The poets also hope that you'll contribute questions to a sort of Q&A portion that will fall later this evening, and you can type them right into the Q&A box, which you can access from the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. We'll be using Zoom's auto transcription feature this evening, so you can turn on or off the closed captions by clicking on the button in your toolbar that says Live Transcript. Please note that these captions are computer generated, so they may not do justice to the language that we're hearing tonight. So this is another very good reason to purchase books by these poets. And we'll put helpful links into the chat as we go along tonight, so you can do that. So now it's my pleasure to introduce this panel of poets. We'll begin with Diana Khoi Nguyen. She's the author of Ghost of, which came out in 2018 and has received fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts and Kundiman, among others. Excuse me. She was a finalist for the National Book Award and currently teaches at the University of Pittsburgh. Then we'll hear from Octavio Quintanilla, author of the 2014 book, If I Go Missing. Octavio served as the Poet Laureate of San Antonio. His poetry, fiction, translations, and photography appear in numerous publications, and his visual poems have been exhibited in galleries and art museums, including the Museum of Americana. He teaches at Our Lady of the Lake University in San Antonio. And then we'll hear from Anthony Cody, whose 2020 book, Borderland, Apocrypha, was a National Book Award finalist and an LA Times Book Award finalist, among others. He has taught eco-poetry at Fresno State and currently serves as an associate poetry editor for Noemi Press and a poetry editor for Omnidon. Lastly, we'll hear from Jennifer Sperry Steinorth, whose books include Her Red, a graphic poem in 2021, and Awake with 9 Shades from 2019, which was a finalist for Forward Review's Best Poetry. A poet editor, interdisciplinary artist, and licensed builder, she has received grants from Vermont Studio Center and the Sewanee Writers Conference, among others. Currently, she's teaching at the University of Michigan and several other places. Jen is very busy. So thank you so much, poets, for being with us. We're absolutely thrilled to be hearing from you tonight. And I'm going to turn it right over to Diana.
Thank you, Brooke, for those introductions. Howdy, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. I want to start by saying I'm on the unceded ancestral lands of the indigenous peoples, the Lenni Lenape, the Shawnee, and the Haudenosaunee, otherwise known as Pittsburgh in the United States. It's good to be here. We have a tornado warning and big storms, so if I disappear, I'll hop back on my phone and make it work. But there's a contingency plan, you know, because these things do happen. I'm so excited to gather with these folks whom I admire. I teach. I've been with, at least I've been with Jen in kind of physical proximity back once upon a time. And for today's kind of gathering here, I'm just going to share two pieces, but I'm going to talk a little bit about process and some of my thinking behind the kind of like play, which then allowed for these things to emerge because I wasn't setting out to kind of produce something. I was more of seeing what happened while containing the things that I know and the archives that I'm working with. So a little bit of a content advisory if you're unfamiliar with my work. I work predominantly with my parents' refugee experience leaving Vietnam after the end of the Saigon War, otherwise known as the American War for them. And I'm also working in the aftermath of my brother's suicide in 2014. So the main things you need to know is 2 years before my brother took his life, he cut himself out of family photographs that hung in the house. He did it with an X-Acto knife, and he put the pictures all back. So he just took his body out quite physically, and didn't take anything else. And so it took a while for folks to notice. And we have a big culture of silence and avoidance in my family, and nobody really addressed it. I wasn't living in that house, but my parents, they emailed me and asked what they should do. And I said, have you spoken to him? Have you checked in on him? Is he okay? First thing is like, is he okay? And the reality is they weren't really on speaking terms with him, and they didn't feel comfortable, which is, I think, such a shame. And I tried to reach out to my brother, and that was really the last time we spoke. I think about a lot. What are the words I said? What are the questions I could have asked? And he wasn't really speaking to anybody in the family, and he was still living in the same house with my parents up until the day that he died. So I'm working a lot with the archive, the photographs that he's left behind, but also in the years after, I began to work in the home video archive where he's still intact, where he's still alive, where he exists wholly, but as a 4-year-old or as a 10-year-old. And so forth. So that's a little bit kind of context. I'm working with the photographic archive, the video archive. And then I'll tell you one more story, and I swear I'll show you some work. We don't know how to talk about in my family mental illness. And unfortunately, this is something that I see quite in common within the Vietnamese diaspora community. So, and my parents are both, computer engineers. And so they're very logical about things, and they don't understand, they're able to not acknowledge that my brother was perhaps depressed. So my mother's constantly coming up with reasons for why he took his life. And one time she called me and she said, he killed himself because he wanted to sleep, because he was an insomniac. And I was like, yeah, I know, but he had a hard time sleeping for many years. And she's like, yeah, but there's a story I need to tell you. She said, one time he told her, this is when they were still in speaking terms, he said, that he could hear a humming in the walls of the house. And my parents kind of didn't really pay attention to it. And they're like, we don't hear anything. Don't worry about it. Go to sleep. But it was only after his death, months after, that they were cleaning up in the attic and they found thousands of dead bees. And so my mother was like, well, these bees were there. He heard them. They kept him up and he couldn't sleep. So he took his life so he could sleep now. And, she kind of delivers it in this really matter-of-fact way. And I'm pretty gutted listening to her say this. And I thought a lot about what it might mean for somebody to hear something that nobody else acknowledges, that perhaps you don't even know if it exists, right? If nobody else can hear what you hear, and how lonely that might be. And Jen knows this well, because when I was at Sewanee with her, I used to engage audiences at readings to hum with me, for all of us to stand in sound from our bodies in a nonverbal way, as an act of resistance against not being heard. And so that'll be the soundtrack actually for this video that I'm going to share. And then I'm doing this crazy other project now too, where I found my parents' honeymoon videos where, you know, it's like that Sharon Olds thing. They don't know what they're going to do to each other. They don't know the kids that they're going to have and what one of them will do to his own life, taking it, that is. So, and you know, my mother and I are estranged as well because she is the primary abuser in my family, which is also something that's kind of really unacknowledged, but which is also captured in parts of the video archives. So I'm trying to figure out how to work with that. This is a long way of saying, like, how do you contain this in a poem when you have artifacts, right? Like, do we describe what's happening in the video? So instead, I'm just using the texture of video to communicate. And so that's the first piece that I will share. The footage that you'll see, partly home video, and then the other part is a recreation where I'm recreating my mother's honeymoon, where I dressed just like her in Hawaii. And so that's a little bit of context. Long wind up for a 1 minute and 16 minute, like 1 minute, 16 second clip. Okay, so I'm just gonna share this now. I think in my nervousness, I forgot to like move my cursor. That's okay. So I was trying to retrace where my parents went on their honeymoon, and my fiance at the time had to study my dad's like cinematography news, you know, and it's just a lot of images of my mother in a glamorous dress, like walking in nature. And we went to this spot that looks exactly like one of the places where they shot some footage. And there was this sign that said, "Be careful of flying bees." And apparently it's a very windy space on Oahu when you go up the hills from Honolulu to the other side. And I guess there's tons of bees, and the wind is so strong that it flings the bees almost like kind of like bullets. So you have to be really careful how you walk. And when I leaned against the ledge, I just found, you know, I would find these individual bees like clinging on to the ledge and to the leaf. And I don't know why that becomes this kind of larger metaphor for our ecological system and collapse, but it did, and it still moves me to this day. So it's kind of an accident that I discovered that. And then the last piece that I'm going to share. So I work every anniversary of my brother's death. I revisit these photographs. It's kind of like a returning to a grave, but he was cremated. So I don't get to go to the Pacific Ocean, you know, where his ashes were scattered. So I revisit the last thing that I know for sure his hand touched, right? These photographs. In 1 year, I decided, in kind of an act of radical empathy, to maybe try what he did. But I didn't want to cut myself out because I didn't feel very safe. But I thought, well, what happens if I do something different? If I reclaim that space by removing the whole family from this portrait where this thing has happened, right? Like, so like, I'm not trying to erase the family, but I'm just kind of like, remove them from this dangerous zone, right? And I have bad Photoshop skills, but I know how to use the lasso tool. And I'm going to share my screen now. So when I did it, I thought that if I hit delete, it would just like be like that, like checkerboard when you know that something's transparent. But this crazy thing happened where somehow it filled in the background? I don't know how to do that, but like it did that. So like I cut out the family and we were standing in front of bamboo and it filled us in with bamboo. And if you know anything about bamboo, it does not stop growing. It will like grow long after we're gone, right? Like, so this felt really apt. And I kind of love this like Photoshop accident. You will now know that my process is all about accidents. So I began to kind of like work with the piece in this way and then writing over the landscape of the photograph. So it's a series that I'm calling Eclipse. Took me a long time to figure out how to read it. So the next page looks like this, which I will read. But I'll show you the third page and then I'll go back and I'll read this one and then I'll pass the baton along. And then the last page is just what the photograph looks like. So you can kind of see like, you know, where I like missed part of a pant leg or something. But yeah, I mean, the bamboo will be there after we're gone. I really love that. It really soothes me. Okay, so for this is a little weirder on Zoom, but I'm going to play a recording of me reading this, and then I'm also going to read parts of it live. So take with that what you will. You'll hear my voice in the past through a recording, and then if you follow my screen, you'll see my lips move, you know? So it's an experiment. And thank you for listening, and thank you for your time, and so excited to be in conversation and to hear your questions. Okay. Oh, I think I forgot to hit a button. So give me 1 second. It's like a little oopsie. Let's share it one more time. Oh, it was hit. Okay. Okay, here we go.
In one version of the story, you're alive. You wake up. You've been trying for years to get it back, for so long that you can't remember what it is or was anymore. You knew you'd been trying, you couldn't leave, and then one day your things were gone. All that remained was an empty bed, framed like a cage, broken down and left
And
open like a trap ajar. By all accounts, you were free. You had cut yourself off. You cut us off.
off
And
and
we rejoiced. It was a sign, Mother said. If you could leave, then you were well
to
well
what?
enough to go. No one asked where or how or when. Only the fact of it remained. We celebrated you grown and flown. Where did you go in this version of the story? Before you're
You're
alive and
alive,
wake
and
up. I imagine you
imagine
sitting
you
on the side of your bed in the room of a house,
house
of
of
a
a
man you
man
knew
you
briefly from
befriend
nights playing badminton. Perhaps all that volleying
and
turned into
turned into
small
small
parcels of belonging.
belonging,
Did your heart swell in recognition of it? Were you seen as you
seen as you
hadn't
hadn't
been? I've been seeing you
seen you.
now, seeing you leap to hit that birdie, your dark head in a
Ed in a
court of
cord,
other dark
dark
heads,
heads,
all
all
eyes
eyes
darting to
dart,
follow, to catch, so as to strike, striking a letting
letting
go of the
go of the
bird. It
bird. It
lets it
lets it
go
go
over to
over
the
to the
other side, and often it comes back over, back how I
how I
find
find
pleasure in
pleasure
sending
in
the
sending
bird
the
between
bird
us over and back. That is not an efficient way of winning,
winning
of
of
ending the
ending the
match, I
match. I
know,
know, but
but oh, how I never play to win. I never win. I wanted the volley to
volley to
continue,
continue,
never
never
to
to
stop in
stop,
this
and
version of the story. You're alive, picky as ever, staring at your
staring at your
chicken
chicken
sandwich while I
sandwich while I
lie
lie
by the
but
window in another country, watching clouds skip
it
like stones
stones
along the
along the
lake.
lake.
As
As
long as
long
the
as the
world
what
moves along, I can stay this delirium in which the sparkling
sparkling
tailed
tailed
hummingbird
hummingbird
zips
zips
to feed from petals just beside me. I move and he is gone.
gone, and
And the rain
rain
again.
again.
In the
In the
rain, I
rain,
recreate what I saw. Try to conjure him, and he's back. I
I
try to
try to
conjure,
conjure,
and he's
and he's
back.
back.
Why
Why
conjure
conjure
then
to
at all but to listen for his arrival at the hum of his
his
departure?
depart?
In
In
this
this
story,
story,
you're
you're
back.
back.
You lose all patience, volleying birdies with me. But I can't help
Can't
it.
help.
I
I
don't want the
don't
bird to
want bird
touch
to
the ground in this story. A bee crawled out of the kitchen.
kitchen.
What had
What
it
had
been
I
doing when I
doing?
could not see it? I lifted her up and let her go. Do you think
Ooh,
she'll make it?
should
I
I
ask.
ask?
But you
But
don't
you
hear
don't.
me yet. You don't hear.
Okay, thank you. And next will be Octavio.
Okay. Can you hear me? Thanks, Diana. That's amazing. Beautiful. And maybe during the questions we can talk about it because I have some comments about it. I just want to thank everybody here for joining us, Diana, Jan, Cody, and Brooke for helping us and guiding us through this process of this presentation. So I'm going to make the assumption that many of you are not familiar with my work. So I want to show you a PowerPoint where I want to talk about my process, because like Diana, I'm also very interested in process. So I'll talk about my visual poetics and where they've been and where I want them to go. So let me try this here. Everybody see that? Yes? Okay, cool. So I call my visual poems from textos, and it's a blending of two words, frontera and texto. I'm from South Texas, the Borderlands, and at first at the beginning I called them borradores, which in Spanish means draft, but then I wanted to come up with a new term, something new that would fit what I was trying to do, and more than anything that kind of evoked where I come from. And my sensibilities as a writer, a poet, and as an American. So in 2018, this is the first Frontexto that I did. And just to give you some context, and I think I have about 10 minutes, so I'm gonna go pretty fast. I used to paint in my 20s, and then I stopped for a long time. I just didn't have the material or the means to buy material to paint. So my focus became writing, and then my focus became poetry. And anyway, in 2018, I wanted to challenge myself to write every day something. And so I bought a bunch of notebooks, the moleskin notebooks, and my challenge was to write every day. And as you can see here, the page is basically full of text. And you can probably notice that it's also written in Spanish. Even though I was born here in Texas, I lived the first 9 years of my life in Mexico. And once I came over here when I was 9 to go to school, I slowly began to forget how to speak Spanish. And even though we did speak Spanish at home, it wasn't the formal Spanish that I guess I was getting used to in school, and something that I wanted to relearn, and that's why I decided to write in Spanish. And I think also one of the main reasons is that in 2018 or so there was a lot of violence against people who spoke Spanish in public. I kept seeing videos of that, and this was kind of like my way of resisting and just throwing the finger at people who were hating on people who spoke Spanish. And so as you can see visually, I just I fell in love with it. I kind of, you can see my process of revising and deleting and blacking out text as I kept writing. And that's how I took it, as a draft at the beginning. And I knew that hopefully if I kept doing it, it would get stronger and it will get better. And at the bottom, you see like a little snail, and in January 1st, I also started posting them on social media, specifically Facebook. So every day I would post one. So every day I would be creating a frontexto. Now I work every day, but I'm not stressed about creating one every day because I have plenty of work that is already done. But my commitment to posting and sharing a frontexto every day on social media continues. And so I have different series. This is one of the most recent ones. If you notice at the beginning, I mostly used ink and paper, and it was really easy to smear and stuff like that. And finally, I started using color and paint. And this is most of the images that I'm going to show you come from a new series that I have. It's called Abstract Borderland. And as you know, I'm from the Borderlands. And with this, I just wanted to, more than anything, I just wanted to experiment with abstraction. And also the work, you know, if you didn't know that I was from the border, from the South Texas border, I don't know if you would recognize this as work or images that come from the borderland. And I think that was one of my reasons for doing this type of work, kind of to counterpoint some of the images and stereotypes that the popular imagination has of the border, specifically people who have never been there. You know, a border full of violence, immigrants and migrants and drugs, poverty, colonias. And yeah, a lot of that exists, but there's also a lot of beauty. And that's something that often we don't hear about and we don't see. So another thing that I want you to notice is that the text in the new series is becoming a lot less. And it's almost on the margins. It's like it wants to disappear, you know? And I think it has to do with many things, but I think one of them is just giving the image some room to breathe, to speak without, you know, written language, even though there's still text kind of to guide the viewer. And of course, I play with that. There's a lot of play here. You know, to sometimes the text and the image don't always correspond, and I think that's part of the fun of this. That I'm having fun with the audience too, especially with people that with readers who do not understand Spanish and don't want to take the time to translate a line. You know, I'm going to read a poem at the end, but this one, it says, ¿Qué parte de tu memoria? Oh God, I can't read it because of that thing. Hold on. ¿Qué parte de tu memoria te duele cuando tienes hambre? What part of your memory hurts when you're hungry? You know, so you have a text like that, and then you start looking at the images, and this is where the dialogue begins between the image and the viewer and the reader. You know, you're not just reading text, but you're also reading images, I think. And this is, I don't know, for some of you, you might not recognize this as being South Texas, but in my imagination it is. And I've seen scenes like that, you know. So every day I try to, I'm working on something, even though I'm not necessarily pressured to finish anything, because I already have plenty of work that I can be sharing on social media. And you know, what's really cool about it is that even though there's a lot of play here, I'm not always, I don't always know what's going to happen at the end. Sometimes I do have an image, and sometimes, you know, images, themes, motifs keep appearing. But a lot of times, the first thing that I do is either write something, or doodle something, or just do lines, you know. And then slowly, the images, the poem, starts taking shape. And also, another thing is that I'm not wedded to the text. I can write a poem, and I might just write something on top of, paint something, or you know, create layers. I also like that. You know, a lot of layering, a lot of texture, um, we're gonna talk a little bit about later, I guess. But one of the things that I'm gonna start doing, and that I started doing, is doing sculpture, because I want people to touch my work, and this is where I'm at right now too. This is visual poetics in a world of Word doc. How do we get out of that, the Word document? And one of the things of how I do it is by doing poetry on canvas. And recently I had an exhibit in Brownsville, Texas, where I had 20 paintings, and my idea was that it was a book. It was 20 poems. So I'm interested not just in writing poetry, visual poetry, and text and all that, but also I'm interested in breaking the confinements of what we think a book is, and where we're supposed to read it, and how we interact with that. So this is canvas, and as you can see, it's kind of liberating to have all that space and do whatever the hell you want, and write. I think, Anthony, I don't know where I heard you say this, but kind of like breaking away from the left margin, and just doing all kinds of things, and create that. It becomes physical too, because you got to move around. The experience of reading, I think. And this is, I had to include this because I do want to honor my father. He died a few years ago, and this is a portrait I did of him. But while I was doing it, I was thinking of poetic lines, and I don't know if you can see the face, but it's there. And this one has no text at all, but I kind of see it as systemic writing, and I guess this one is probably the most personal. And this is another one, and I think I'll read this poem. Let's see if I can read it here. More naked than a poem, nothing. Not the universe or the rain galloping on your nape. Not the bird flexing its wings against the wind, or the summer shedding its skin for fall. Tonight, what can't be touched of who I am lies naked next to you. Read me with your love. Read me with the star you found in the hollow of your hand. More naked than a poem, nothing. And I want to end my presentation with a video, and it's very short, but it's another project that I started doing maybe like a few months ago. A collector of my work wanted, like, I don't know, 20 prints. And I really don't like making prints of my work because it takes a lot of time. But I said, okay, I'll do it. So what I did was like, well, I have 20 prints. What do I do with them? I just don't want to mail them out. So I created this. I created a box book. So with that, I just want to say that so far I've done like 20 box books, and they're all different. They're all titled differently. And again, it's another way of pushing boundaries, of reconsidering how we engage with poetry and books, and that's my thing. Let me see here. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you so much for that, Octavio. That's.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Anthony's next.
I was gonna say I need to get in line to get one of those box books. Before I begin, I just want to say that I'm zooming in today from the traditional lands of the Yokuts. I pay my respect to the natives, both of the past and the present, and hope that we can honor the true stewards of the land and the land itself. Octavio mentioned something at the very end of his presentation that was super helpful and like transitions really well to me because it was something I did want to talk about before I dive into my poems. And that's that around 2016, 2015, I started thinking about not only the page as a constraint, but the margin as a constraint. So I started finding and looking at different practices. By nature, I have all these other things around here today: phone books, catalog cards, non-traditional paper, things of that nature, just to kind of play with and kind of look through all the things I'm trying to work around. And one of those things I was working with was actually the history of lynchings in the Southwest of Mexican and Mexican Americans. And that's what led to my first collection, Borderland Apocrypha. And really thinking that through, and how can the margin get pushed and get lengthened and extended, and what happens with that. So it actually began in a state of play. I went to art supply place and was just looking at paper, and I found a comic strip pad, 5 by 17. So, you know, traditional funnies in the daily paper, sketch amount. And I wrote a title, and I went almost 17 inches with it. And I ended up with all this space, and then I had to figure out what to do with the space. And that's how some of the poems were birthed, in that process of just finding what was around me and going with it. So I think I'm going to start there. I'm going to read 2 poems that came from that, actually from the opening section of my book. And I'll share a screen to kind of give you a sense of kind of how that looks. Here we go. Okay, let me open this up a bit. It's all backwards because that's how I am. So the poem is titled "Standing in Line to Take a Passport Photo. An old white man looks at me and claims I am running. Standing here because my grandpa ran away from home to sell perfume in El Zócalo at 9. In line, I am a lot of things. And since I am a lot of things, I am everything he cannot imagine. A passport photo asks me to 2 by 2 myself and capture what I am in neutral. And I recall I have yet to see the chambers of my heart turn tusk. An old white man is not Gil Scott Heron saying, because I always feel like running, not away, because there is no such place, is not how you pronounce exile or escapar. Looks at me how Teddy Roosevelt died coveting a white buffalo. Claims I am afraid. No, I am a wall. No, I am a mirror. I am still, so still. And one of the things I'll say about this is that you can see that there's footnotation, and I start thinking about this context within history and how my pushed away margin, like in a chronological way, and how all of these things are cascading in a single moment when, you know, white man wants to know why I'm trying to get a passport photo. And so I built off that. So I'll share the next poem after that, and you'll see that the title is from the previous poem, the first stanza, or the second stanza, I'm sorry. A passport photo asks me to 2 by 2 myself and capture what I am in neutral. And I recall I have yet to see the chamber of my heart turn tusk. A passport photo should be mailed to the federal government with the birth certificate, and I wonder if they will return. Consider the power of printed paper. Asks me daily, am I brown? Am I white? Am I? I am. Am I? I am. I am. I am. I wonder when the tense transitions. 2 by 2 myself, a neat shape, raises no questions and tells you no lies. Capture what I am in neutral. I have yet to see a sunrise in the shadow or a child birth itself from the inside of the Joshua tree. And this does not mean it is not possible. The chamber of my heart is a quiet, the outside of a pulse driving into fire. Turn tusk, turn dusk, turn day, turn lengua, turn franca, turn español, turn sombra, así, atrás, allí, acá, to here. Yes, here, yes, here. It is dark. I can stop my share. So like you can kind of see, I'm trying to see how far out I can push these moments, but also at the same time work in some images to kind of be in place of some of the emotion that I am experiencing, the buffalo bucking off the colonizer in that case, or the more kind of thing that I think Octavio was getting at is how do I bring a reader into proximity, right? How do you take the book and instead of being a thing that you flip through, something you have to sit with, move, and move to read it, to really kind of dig into it and make it a tactile kind of experience. And that kind of got me moving and thinking of how far I can go, of how far can I push it, of what is the very end of like the margin, right? And actually that's the last poem I'm going to share, which is a bit of a video and an image and an artifact and object, because I have about 7 feet of poems. I'm not going to read the whole thing because that would be not the wise thing to do. But I'm going to share a video, kind of an up close kind of Ken Burns effect, so to speak, of the poem, and then I'll kind of hand it off. And I will say, the 7 feet of poem is also inspired by Carlos Oquendo de Amat, a Peruvian poet from like 1920s. So nothing's new. We're just kind of following the tracks of our ancestors. So let me do this share screen and share sound. In the middle of it, I'm going to play a small short, like 45-second video, a 45-second clip, which is of a storm here in Fresno, as well as a presentation around climate collapse, because I live in California. And, you know, during this whole pandemic, I'm always left with, is it COVID or is it the air that has made me fall ill, just from the smoke and all the fires. So I think I'll leave you with that, and I'll close and then I'll hand it over to you, Jen. These are also photos from Dorothea Lange's archive of chronicling the Dust Bowl. The similarities between that and now haunt me still. This is a trend line of the temperature in the United States from 1918 to 2018, 100 years. This is the peak. This is the beginning of the Dust Bowl. Some will say that the Dust Bowl is in the past, and that is true. Some will say that we should bury the past or the future is now. But really, what they are saying is move onward and upward. And really, that is all cliche. How an uncle tells me my grandmother is in a better place, which could be a lot of things, but mostly the hope is pacify. The trend line is moving up, and the state of current economies, it combusts. An actuarialist to see these peaks are now off the page to the present day. This is a real chart. The same way an actuarialist is an expert in determining uncertainty and risk in the state of current economies, reward. The actuarialist studies the life expectancy of both the financial and the living things, leaning upon the financial things. And if we are about life expectancy, we are really saying that people are looking at how long we will live and how much living we will do while alive. And if so, what does the future look like with a trend line that continues ascension? A future of expansion finds a cliff and recedes. Unlike the rivers and lakes and oceans, a futurism of invention, not of brilliance, but from the accessibility of survival. Someone will say survival is a necessity of invention. So now let me find that clip and play that.
What are the valued norms and behaviours that human societies will wish to maintain? You will fear as they see in I know you may have little time and space for reinventing systems of upholding the norms of the current society. But our idealism of your civilization eroded when I question indeed it is impossible. How do we keep and to attempt it would be to assume we are in a situation for calculated what do we need to let go of? I have dubbed this with these words adaptation and restoration asks us what systems bring back denial to help us with the defeating the sense of doom, inevitability, the deep adaptation agenda. I know you may have little time and space for reinventing when I question why I was even writing this.
A, will you listen to the voice sculpture? B, will you listen to the voice sculpture again and write? C, will you remember the sound of the chimes? D, will you be able to write in the shape of those chimes? E, what is value? What do you value? F, what can you relinquish? Have you tested your grip strength? G, when was the last moment that something was pulled from your hands? H, in the deep adaptation, how will you tell the tangible goodbye? I, have you considered the taste of water uncontaminated? J, if you could cleanse and decontaminate one aquifer, would it be the one you drink from or the one the largest population in the world drinks from? K, in the deep adaptation to climate change, I might not be rhetorical. So which aquifer will you choose? L, what about the people drinking from the aquifers that are now contaminated or completely dried out? Which is worse? M, you fight a man for the last bottle of milk for a baby? And have you considered the ways in which your footprint, literal and figurative, can be negated? O, are you reading? P, are you listening? Q, have you considered how a family tree stopped growing? R, how will you communicate when the cooling system for all the internet server farms run out of water? S, what is post-internet? T, who is in control? U, are you here? Thank you.
Wow. I'm thinking how much, thank you to all of you who are here. And I feel like completely washed and like I've forgotten everything that I might want to say. And then I think like, oh, and that's what this is about, right? That we rediscover ourselves in relationship to one another. I'm so thankful. And with that, thinking about relationship, I want to say, my name is Jen, and my dwelling occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe people, the Three Fires Confederacy of the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi people. I wish to honor their stewardship of the land, past and present, and in the future. So I will be reading today from a project that I started having no idea if it would go anywhere. Like I think everyone has spoken already. It was 2016. I was enraged at so many things that I saw occurring on the national stage, and the ways that I saw them in some of the things being resonant with things happening in my personal and professional life, and had a lot that I wanted to excise and found that I had no language to do it. And so I've been interested in erasure, and I picked up a book at a library discard sale. It looked kind of like this. This is not the book. This is an intact copy. The Meaning of Art by Herbert Reed. And I thought, this is a pretty little book. I can destroy it. So, and then as I looked at it more, I started to see that the book is, it is a survey of art from prehistory to the modern era. So it covers a big span of time, and there are no women artists. The book is written by a prominent male poet, Herbert Reed. He is a knight. He is also an art critic, and no female artists were mentioned. And so I started to think about the sort of double erasure that happens not only when one's voice is not allowed to be an author, a maker, a speaker for oneself, but when one's story gets told by others. Because of course, art also tells us who we are. And the female form in numerous ways is the subject of a great number of paintings. And even today, we really can't escape the sort of that objectivity. Also, I should say what was happening while I was working on this project is that I was going through, I had not yet been diagnosed, but I was going through a very tedious process of trying to figure out why I was having extreme physical chronic pain that made regular working not possible. And so I started to like meld these various things together, these sort of national gaslighting, centuries of gaslighting, and then also an estrangement and wars that were happening inside my own body. And I feel like the manipulation of the physical artifact became a way through which I could free voice that I couldn't access otherwise. So I will, let's see, is there anything else I want to say? I've chosen, I'm going to read you sections mostly starting in the beginning and excerpting, braiding pieces of it together in just a single fluid sweep. I wanted to focus on, there are a lot of different themes that come and go, but some of the images and ideas that have to do with the female form's relationship to the Christian faith. That's a big subject in Western art, and it's pictures that show up quite a bit in the book. Also, I'm thinking about that relative to what we're seeing now in terms of abortion laws. I was just earlier today walking past in a normal walk, the Planned Parenthood, where people were gathered around in prayer. And so I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking about the way that my extreme discomfort with the way that certain female bodies are held up and used as symbols to subjugate others. So with that, I'll just begin. Let's see when I find, yeah. Okay. I'm not going to read these pages. These are early in the book, and you see it's mostly white. And as the book evolves, the manipulation gets more intense as the speakers gain agency over the materials. Polite drawings of animals in pain, common on the walls of caves, tempt the eyes. A bull leaping between and dark conceives me, probably with a spatula of sharpened bone. Hush pain, in the last century lost territory, but flourished over thousands of years. Incidentally, the doctor suggests a culture of spa, and I question the character of my significance. Records exist of our pain. Pain is remarkable. Shh, 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 hush, shh, shush, hush, wee, soft, wee, pretty. When he used to suggest, shh, pain, Dr. K conceived a whole as a fun part, members own.
The whole endows an uncanny vitality over which stretch the skins of human terror. Indeed, the refinement of the tortured faces, of the streaming wounds, of the unraveled guts and severed breasts of sadism is intense. It is also trained, dominated, and thereby exercised. Before we condemn sadism, we must know about myth and folklore, fairy tales and horror. We must be sadistic in this way, be peaceful and loving. Can we know too little, too much about our own righteous dog? I practice a disinterested appreciation, a state of passive receptiveness, as Roger Fry called it, and so find endless pleasure. We know a flue penetrates eye. We know an ohm stretching from eyeland through to the Renaissance. Oh, we come to be mother. Other, other. As ever, mother, we conceive. Hand of my mom, mi mom, madre, ma mère, mama, mama, soft, sin word, strange, uncontent to remain outside. But softly we hum, feeling worser and worser, slowly learning our mom's genius is buried in the cellar. Thirst is a discipline of color, of pain, a brush, and years of rain. Thirst is author and judge of mother. It makes then passes through her fingers. Ink every vulgar mother whole story. A sung story conceives a story. Please let us refashion the story. We become symbols of humanity, forbidden of the decorative tradition, exiles with the most sensitive skin. But our skin by and by betrays us, by and by manifests thus, by, gory, gory God, by dog, gory dog, bye. This is not to deny my empire, waste. The dominion of wild fantasy, animal motives, graceful arabesques, and flowery diapers is well established. Oh, Virgin, with the lust of angels and curs, at beloved's behest, I played thee. Masters say pain is dominated by the whip of longing. Masters say pain is the dominion of ecstasy. Masters say pain is a dominatrix, is Italian. Say love in italics, apply hot wax, sweet boy. This is a process can only be described as loving care. Comes lowliness, comes surprise, comes in a hood, in a van, in a cot, act natural. Frond of fern, petal of flower, lowly, the highest expression of sainthood, sweet head tumbling out, a van, a cot, my mouth. Let's all pose for Saint Francis. The landscape expects to consort with ecstasy. Pull back my head, pull back your hood. The dead is no actual person, cries, Master, master, read me top to bottom. Master, master, read me under the covers. Master me over the others, bottom to top, bottoms up. Let's all drink the Virgin. Master, sweet master, peace me. Let me drink you under the table spread like butter, where by thigh. There but for a white unmarked van go I, but for the grace of a waxwork saint. Oh, you found my stigmata. Mister, I am not your masterpiece. Darling, you're my very best virgin. Don't you know, if pain be real, the best virgins are the ones who play pretend? And still we cannot speak. Why Her silence with its dark and overnourished forms must be a tinkling of bells, graceful and fugitive. Deal, 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 deal. No, 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 no. The tomb has windows, a shadow relief. I may step out with the devil to escape. No, no, no. To be amused at the ambition of tombs. The costume into which we are born is old-fashioned. In the blue of war, over yellow roads, in cities, on stage, in plastic wards, bare-faced and desert-shorn, we have born masters. No memory of an unborn master. Yet must we be born one or the other? Could we be neither and wonder? Or is there ever a king in speaking, one who proclaims, I pain what I see? In his book, he who transforms the sun transforms into the sun, who we, child, must admire. For shame is born a master child, son of war, a pulsing laboratory with its own official flora and fauna. Mind child, mind child, mind not our professors of shame, their fine nervous lines, their rank religious fantasy. To love yourself is no lunacy, or if lunatic it be, give us the key to the lunatics. Theirs is the only music. They speak to us in the language of the dead reborn, reread, their child. We need not be afraid. Between dog and wolf, there is nothing, much less love, but between a shadow and the sun, there is a body. I'll stop there. And now we can chat.
Yeah, thank you so much. Anthony, Octavio, me, all of us are being here. Wow. I just need a moment to just like allow for the chat to go wild. I'm a kind of unofficial moderator here, mostly because I'm curious. I know you all have questions too. So, and we have one question already in the Q&A, but I'm going to invite the audience to offer their questions here. But as we allow for those offerings to kind of trickle in, there's this one question that I think comes from Anthony for us, especially as, we are poets. We are poets. Yes, we are poets. We are poets. I don't know how to say that so many times. Or we have training in some fashion, right, before for a substantial amount of time. And we're also engaging all these other modes, specifically visual modes. And so how did folks come into these media training? I know, Octavio, you mentioned you used to paint and there was a kind of like access hardship. And now there's a returning to it, but I don't know if you took classes, and Anthony, I know you went to the art store, but, and nobody trained me in how to use any like Photoshop or video stuff. I'm just like pressing buttons and seeing what happens, like kid and Jen, like just seeing there's, sewing, there's so many textures and the way in which you're composing, recomposing and cutting out each, there's so many aspects to how erasure can exist within that book. So I'm just curious to hear folks speak about these adjacent practices that they're bringing into their poetics, right?
I guess I can go since I broached the question. For me, it's kind of like random skills I've had to acquire in the hustle of like doing nonprofit work. Not like the artistry side. I'm a terrible like by hand artist, but once I get like in digital mode and can like work with like the pen or the touch screen or some of like the graphic design apps, I'm able to sort of manipulate and work through things in a different way. YouTube has been very helpful in like self-teaching. And then also I spent time as a graphic designer, oddly enough, in doing communications, having to make like graphic design things because someone has to make a poster for like a theater event. Someone has to make a poster for XYZ. And so like little by little, I've had to like learn those skills. So the next thing of using like audio and visual and like a moving visual is like the next frontier. So so that's little by little.
Well, in my case, no, I don't have any training. It's all talent. No, it's exploration. It's not being afraid to make mistakes. It's practice. It's commitment to the art, and it's. I was having a conversation a few days ago at some other presentation, and it just hit me. I mean, for the last 3.5 years, I've been doing film textos every day. I should have an MFA already, you know? Somebody gave me an honorary MFA because it's not just doing it, it's study, you know, it's reading, it's research, it's all those components, you know? So it's not just, oh, I'm gonna paint and whatever. No, it's a lot of work. But no, I've, you know, I never took art classes other than the ones that I took in high school. And I'm not a great illustrator. I try, but I think I can say confidently that for the last 3.5 years, my skills, I can see them growing. I think that's what's important, you know?
I came into this feeling like completely novice. And when I started the erasure, I had no intention of making a visual book. It wasn't until I was at Vermont Studio Center and I had done some little things where I had a problem, like a thing where I wanted the line to be read a certain way. And I realized I had to make some marks to guide the reader to do that. And I got a lot of encouragement there from the visual artist that kind of gave me permission. But I do have formal training. I was a dancer. That was my first love, like great love. And I danced until I was around 20 very seriously. And like in a pre-professional, semi-professional capacity. And then I design homes, so work in architecture. And when people would ask me if I have formal training in architecture, I'd say no, but I have this like classical ballet training, so clearly I'm qualified. And I say that as a joke, but I really think that training in one form gives you so much conceptual, understanding of, you know, and then also the discipline, but like thinking about entrances and exits applies to dance, applies to poetry, applies to obviously homes, the movement of the eye on the page, like all of those things. And I think that sometimes I'm working in processes of translation that still go back to dance. Like I can't, you know, not talk with my hands or like sit still and think really hard sometimes. So yeah, I think all of those ways that we come, you know, slant wise help.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of whether external permission, right? But internal permission, which I think is huge too. For a long time, I was like, I can't do that. That would be foolish. I'm not qualified, you know. But and I actually, some ways you are qualified because like you'll make mistakes or you'll do moves that maybe would seem gauche, you know, to someone with the MFA or in pursuit of an MFA. And it's like, you know, with my students all the time, I'm like, these are the rules, but also break them, right? Like it gives you kind of foundation. And I love what Octavio mentioned too. And Jen, like we bring a rigor of what we've been training in, right? And we translate into our next area of focus. Mm-hmm. And that means we're curious till we die. And we're constantly learning and acquiring tools, whatever form that is, right? And then you have to do research to figure out how to acquire those things that you don't know how to do, and then talking with other people and going to places you wouldn't normally. Yeah, absolutely.
Can I add something to that? I was just thinking, because one of the questions I had was about silence being like, I get the sense from your work, and I felt that way from my work, that I kind of had to, that my language got stuck and I had to come in backwards. And so working into another domain allowed me to back into language, but it also feels like an embodied sort of thing that comes, there's a different sort of embodiment. And so I was curious about that, the relationship between silence and the other modalities, and the type of embodiments that happen when there's but when we're not just working in one mode. And of course, like, you're never just working in one mode. Like, if you're speaking words, you're using audio, and if you're writing them down on the page, you're making visuals. But yeah, I don't know if my question is framed as much like a question as it should be, but.
Well, I can say something about that. I don't know if it's answering your question, but this idea of silence, I think, as you noticed, a lot of the frontextos, the new ones, don't have a lot of text. And I think it's the silence that I need. I get tired of language sometimes. Mm-hmm. So I want to think in a different way. And write, if I call it visual literacy, in a different way, think about the world in a different way, not always with words. I get tired of writing sentences, for example. And I need that silence so I can focus on this new sound that I'm discovering. That's what I had to say.
Yeah. Silence is super relative, right? For those with hearing different abilities, like, there is no such thing as silence, right? So like, we think about different forms of like what we cannot hear, or how do we capture, like, in the quiet, the various forms of quiet that we have. And I think it makes sense to go to the nonverbal, right? And how to represent that, whether through arrangement, through kinetic energy, through color, through layers, like all of those textures enact a kind of silence, right? Which is the way, like, unable to be expressed in like the alphabet. And so I've been thinking, Jen, I've been thinking about it that way. Like, I feel I have like this guttural reaction when I see marks on those pages, right? These on the erasures. And that's like a feeling that I'm responding to, like a groove, which is not a word, and similarly, Octavio, when I look at the arrangement of certain lines, right? Or when the layers, and when something is like almost like a specter coming through some of the colors. And then Anthony, like when I was looking at the big scroll, I don't know what we're calling it, the 7-foot poem. Sorry, my dog is
still.
But like, I'm seeing aquifers, I'm seeing topographies, and I'm seeing layers of a map, right? That's all communicating so many things that like language isn't enough. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but like that's how I'm thinking about, Jen, this question that you posed.
Yeah, I think about like in terms of symbol, or the absence of symbol, right? So you have those moments of like negative space or empty space to like offset some of those textures, or those sort of layers on top of the page, right? What's underneath, whatever you privilege for the eye to move to one side versus the other. I'm thinking kind of in that way. So like, in that emptiness, or that void, or that negative space, whatever you want to call it, what that does, how does that amplify? If there's only one little circle in the bottom of your page, what is that doing? Versus it could be a quiet piece. What happens if you do one long line through there of an unending, poem line? Then what?
There's one more thing about silence. I think I was thinking in terms of rest. Rest. language, that, writing, transcription, and thinking with a different
That's
silence, I guess.
Mhm.
that kind of felt like a little bit the move initially toward the erasure, is that I had to silence like the voice of the source author, what became a stand-in for all this other noise happening, and I needed to silence that in order to hear something else, which feels like the rest part, that which I also think of rest as in the musical rest.
Yeah, like sheet music. I think there was a
Yeah.
comment in the chat about sheet music,
Oh,
especially
nice.
as I was listening to everybody here read. So I'm going through this Q&A. Folks can do a thumbs up if they want to move like second to a question. I think Anthony somehow came unpinned for some reason.
Oh.
I'll add a spotlight. Just want to make sure Anthony, I don't want to be the spotlight. What happened?
I think my internet dropped or something.
Oh, okay. So I think we're all getting added. Okay. So I'm gonna actually, so folks, please, thank you for giving a thumbs up for some of these questions. It helps the privilege. I'm gonna begin with some works I think that are more inclusive of all of us here. So there's one here about like reading aloud work in the making process, or like we brought up the audio kind of component. And I know this is a visual panel on a visual, but I think there was a huge component of audio in how each of us performed it. And in the videos that we showed, there was either music, right, or other kind of sound qualities at work here. So I'm curious, sorry, like my little window keeps kind of moving as people are like thumbs upping. So like, it's like shifting. I guess I'll read the full question. Are we recording ourselves, listening, painting, erasing as we move along? And what part is improv in the time of making, especially as like we think about the audio nature in our process? I hope that question kind of made sense. I can paste it into the chat too, in case for visual people.
Do you want to jump on the question, Diana? Do you have I feel like I need a second.
Oh, I think I cut and pasted the wrong one. Holy crap.
Oh.
Okay. So my question, like the question about audio, I don't have a direct answer to it. And this is something I talk about all the time. A visual realm is one where we are very distanced. Even when we touch, right? It's between the barrier of our skin and that surface. And of course, a lot of us are working digitally too. And so I think sound is really important to bring into this process, because sound enters into our ear and we translate the vibration. So I think a lot about, I don't know what else to say other than I think about that, about how we cannot like shut off our ears, but we can close our eyes.
Can I jump in on that?
Go ahead.
Remember the last presentation we did, Jen and Diana, where I actually created a song out of the scraping of a canvas? Or not a song, but like melodies. So, painting, it's, I don't know what your notion of it is or experience, but it's not a quiet process for me, because it's very physical. I use all kinds of tools and scraping. I paint, like I said before, I do a lot of layering, so I can paint something on canvas and paint something over it, and then and scrape it out and start again, and look for those elements that I find attractive or that attract me visually. And also tactile, like I touch the canvas. I hope that one day audiences can touch them, because they're very layered. So sound is always there, even though, oh, and by the way, I don't know if it relates to this, but somebody asked me before, do you listen to music when you're painting? And I don't. I'm all here lost, and just the sound of the work at hand. So I don't know if that answers that.
Yeah. For me, I actually don't think about reading the work aloud or anything until after I'm kind of working through it. And sometimes I don't even know how I'm going to read a poem. In fact, some of the poems that appear in the book, I had never read them out loud until I was on the middle of a Zoom in a pandemic. And I was like, well, I've done it to myself now. I now have to read these. So I'm kind of there's that other negotiation. And I think that also answers like part of a question someone asked about choice and where one begins and where one ends. And for me in the experiment, I try to put like signifiers of where I want someone to start, but I'm handing it over to someone to find out their own meaning. I could write a sonnet and they'll interpret it one way, not the way I wanted it to be interpreted. So I can write an experimental piece and they still might interpret their own way. So I'm just still giving that up, right? So
I think for me, the sound is really a driver, like it's an engine. And I think that goes back to, so when I made a transition from dance to poetry, it took me a while to figure out like what is, and music was definitely the crossover. And to the point where like, I'll sometimes have language, like poems in my sleep that are like on cycles that are like, sometimes I'm like, stop, but and then because it's audio, because I'm really hearing it out loud in my head, with the physicality of the sound, it also feels like it's in my body in the way that Diana was talking about how sound enters like through this cavern of so that is, and not all of the pages in her read are that way, but enough of it, so there are parts where that like it goes more into something that like I wouldn't read on, maybe I could read it, but I wouldn't. I would leave it for the viewer to choose how they want the path to go.
Observation about your work real quick, Jen. I really love the echoes you create, the sound visually and also sonically. And Diana, in your work, I talk about layering paint and all that. I really love the layering of sound. That was incredible. It was very emotionally, it moved me. The audio and then you reading on top of it, and I don't know, it's really cool.
Yeah. I was thinking about that too, in terms of Diana, you doing the reading of the past you, reading alongside yourself, the present you. They're thinking of like the container, right? And so much of the work and doing that is like you've built up this container. Now this is the spillage. The reading is the spillage, right? The live reading, and how that kind of speaks to like pressing against like a limitation, like the Word doc, right? Of how to move beyond that.
I love how you all in your comments and a new question answered, I think, a question I saw in the chat about like, how do we negotiate what like the work right in the reader / the viewer, because there aren't directions necessarily. Like we're in a Western country, so we read left to right, maybe, but when it's a box or when it's a scroll, when things are sideways, and this kind of this forcing of, or not forcing, but like this invitation for a tactile experience, which is a somatic experience, which also is maybe approaching a kind of reader embodiment, right? A different kind of radical empathy on behalf of the reader, of getting closer versus just looking at a text. Yeah, and I can't wait to see, Octavio, these sculptures that you're gonna make, because I think usually the sculpture, it's like, do not touch, and your sculptures are like, touch.
Yes.
Then you're touching other people touching, like, especially in this day of like germs, but the idea of like you're touching with other people.
Yeah, and it's very intimate too, there's an intimacy there in touching somebody's work, somebody's process.
We have a note here that I think we have time for one more question, but there was a question about like avenues for publications. I'm just going to post a link to something that the writer Monica Ong compiled for journals that seek unconventional writings. That's a great starting point. But the last question is, which has the most votes in the Q&A, says, okay, so the audience member says, I am most thrilled by the sense of playfulness we all exhibit. But at the same time, right, we tackle such critical, complicated, and difficult subjects. How do we allow / find ourselves freedom while also diving into the abyss? Is this the subconscious at work? Yet there is such deliberateness in all of our art. How do we balance this in our day-to-day? Do we start with playfulness, for instance? And I'll paste it in the chat since, oh, just got pasted. So it's kind of a long one. Thank you for these questions. And these are such wonderful questions. I wish we had time for all of them.
Yeah, I'll start. I'll jump in. I'm thinking about it in terms of, yeah, like it's one of the things I always, when I'm talking about my work, it's like, this is heavy, right? We're talking about hate crime. We're talking about violences. We're talking about death, and erasure and histories. And it's really like, you know, I want to tell people, like, in real life, I'm really fun. You know, I'm not like all this weight walking around. I think how I shed that, like that emotional weight is through the play, right? It's like, it's a different entry point for me to be able to, like, you know, get my hands on the idea of making a scroll, get my hands in on like just some ink that I don't know how to use, and just figure out what text, what print, how does that work? And that allows for a new sort of entryway. So I'm not coming at it direct, right? So that's usually, that's how I think about it. That playfulness allows some of that unburdening to happen.
Jen, you're muted.
I felt that way too, where you know, I had to be, well, first of all, funny things would occur. Like funny, like I'm working with a constraint, like a very specific constraint. And, you know, like the language would appear sometimes. And like, it was very Latinate language also. So I was constantly searching for something concrete that I could build with. And so rhetorical moves became really important. But also like, there's such a sense of ridiculousness at the whole conceit, and also the whole, like what it's talking about, that, you know, it really was, recently some students said like they were really surprised at how I didn't read the funniest bits, but there was like a lot of out loud laughter. And one woman said like, I was really surprised at how funny this like serious topic is, which made me so happy, because like, of course, when we laugh, like we open ourselves up for like realization, like our guard comes down, and then like we can receive things in different ways. So I don't know, but I often have found like I need to be lighter, and working with this very specific constraint freed more lightness, in addition to like more grief, you know.
In my case, I think it all starts with play, with fun, with beauty. Like I want to do something beautiful that I find beautiful. And I find it beautiful because of who I am and what I know. You won't believe it, but as throughout the panel, I was working on a frontexto. It started off as Diana, and then I think it looked like Jen, and now it looks like Anthony. So my point is, I don't know where that's going to go, but it's there now. The marks are there. I love making marks, and then making something more figurative or abstract or whatever, you know, color field. So that's how it begins for me. I don't go in terms of, when something pisses me off, I know that I'm doing bad art, and I'm going to do bad art because all my emotions are there. And I just want to say bad things, you know, fuck this, fuck that. But if I go at it in terms of creating something beautiful, then the political is there. I mean, all my work is political. I mean, just by the fact of who I am and where I come from. So more politics in the art, I mean, that's where I start thinking in terms of where does it end? Kind of like Anthony asked, you know, where do you begin and where do you end it? And you know, that's where it becomes more intentional.
I think we should end on those words.
Yes, I agree.
Thank
Can
you
we see
so
the
much.
picture?
Yeah, can we see it again?
Yeah. And those were some of the notes you said, so I'll make prints and send some for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Octavio, that would be a dream.
Awesome.
This whole panel has been a dream. I just am here to thank each of you poets for this conversation, which I have especially enjoyed these ideas about permission and experimentation and silence. And I can't help but bring to mind an image of Emily Dickinson sitting in her room sewing her fascicles. You know, she has this definition of poetry that she wrote to a friend. If I read a book and it makes my whole body so cold, no fire can warm me, I know that is poetry. If I feel physically as if the top of my head were taken off, I know that is poetry. She said these were the only ways that she knew it. And is there any other way? And I do think that tonight you have exploded our definition of poetry. And I know that to be true because of how full my heart is and how many wonderful sentiments are being shared in the chat tonight. So thank you to each of these poets. Thank you to Jen Sperry Steinorth, to Anthony Cody, to Octavio Quintanilla, to Diana Khoi Nguyen. Thank you for being with us. Thank you to our audience, to those of you who tuned in to listen. We have a lot more Tell It Slant Poetry Festival for you coming up this week. You will not want to miss tomorrow's poetry reading with Elizabeth Metzger, Moriel Rothman-Zecker, Chloe Martinez, who I think is here tonight. Hi, Chloe, and Rodney A. Brown. You won't want to miss Friday evening's 5 College Poetry Slam, which is co-produced with the New York and Poets Cafe. And of course, along the way, we're running the Dickinson Poetry Marathon and so many more events. So check those out on our festival platform. And if you want to keep tonight's conversations going, because I see that so many good conversations have started, go find our messaging channel for this program, which you can access from the landing page for this program on our festival platform. We want the festival to be a place of connection and community, and you all are really making that so for us. So finally, this festival is free thanks to donors like you, and we deeply appreciate any contribution that you can make. The link to our donation page is going to pop up for you in a second when we end this webinar. Thank you once again to all of you poets. Round of applause for you. Thank you to our listeners.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take
Be
care.
well.
We'll take care and we'll see you soon. Bye, Anthony. Bye, Diana. Bye, Octavio. Bye, Jen.
Yeah,
Bye.
everybody. Let's email each other.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. Bye.